Well, obviously, my next guest really needs no introduction, I hope, to anybody in the room. As I did iterate last night, David is literally on a flying visit. He really wanted to, come up to AV, and so he left Plymouth at 7 o'clock this morning. Immediately, the curfew was over. He's here, obviously, very briefly, because he has to get back to Plymouth for 7 o'clock tonight. Lynn, unfortunately, is not really feeling very well, so she at the moment is crashed out on the sofa there. And I think we're, obviously all aware of the enormous stress that she has and is under. And really, of course, it's really quite remarkable to see you looking so well, David. I know you might not agree with that, but...
Well, thank you all very much for such a wonderful welcome to a now impoverished ex-prisoner and convict. Lynn did get here about half an hour ago. It is stunning what blackmail can do. She buried her father 2 days ago. And then she heard the next day that she was being extradited to France. In spite of the fact that she is now her mother's only carer. The judge involved, Ian knows his name, is an absolutely cruel master of injustice. In France, both sisters, Lynn and her sister Leslie, are being prosecuted by a French judge, Godard. This man is a master of destroying human rights, people, and legal processes. And what he tends to do is to put people in jail for 2 years, 4 months. And then any surviving, and they are the worst jails in Europe, if anyone survives, he then puts them on trial in such a weakened state they can't fight for themselves. And that's how he gets his prosecution. So what we are really worried about is Lynn will go to France in 12 days and spend 2 years, 4 months in a French prison. And that shows you how little the British government cares for its own citizens. Lynn is completely innocent. Even the MHRA said, well, she's innocent. But the French still want to prosecute her, and the British government so despises its own citizens, it just throws her over to them. So I was hoping Lynn might make it up onto the stage. She won't be able to say anything. But when she heard she was being extradited, she went into another one of 6 states of stress and ended up in Ashford Hospital. So she spent all last night in Ashford Hospital. But, blackmail does work, and she left this morning to come here, but she's in the same state of stress now. So she's lying under a blanket in the room at the back, and I'm not sure she'll be able to get on the stage, but if she does, she won't be able to speak. I said, I promised, I'd be nice to Ian R. Crane this time. I don't know if you know the story, but I was working in ING Bank in Belgium. And my whole life changed when there's one born every minute. I went to an Ian R. Crane lecture at Ghent University in Belgium. And he said, there is a cure for cancer. It's called gcmaf. Put your hands up, all of you have heard of it. Not one of us put our hands up. And so, so I went back home, put it into Google, and there it was. It was 32 scientific research papers from 5 nations by about 70 scientists in those days. And that's it. You know, you just go to PubMed, which is the American National Library of Medicine, key in gcmaf, and these days you'll get more than 70. But that was absolutely incontrovertible proof. You can't have that amount of collusion across 5 nations by 70 scientists. So I decided to spend the rest of my life saving people from cancer. If I hadn't have gone to that Ian R. Crane lecture, I'd probably have had quite a nice life. Ian says it's not his fault. It's President Scott Tips of the Health Federation and their magazine, Health Freedom News. And he also says gcmaf was just a throwaway line. Well, I've now thrown my life away on his throwaway line. So, Ian, that really doesn't help. Do you want me to talk through the beginning of the story? Well, you don't know the beginning. All right. Well, so I was desperately trying to, Bill Sardi wrote an article in Health Freedom News about gcmaf, and that was the first thing I read, and I could understand that. The 32 scientific research papers with 40 characters, words, the only one I can say even now is alpha-N acetylgalactosaminidase, which is the poison that cancer and 50 diseases make to stop your body creating gcmaf. All healthy people have gcmaf in them, so pretty well everyone in this room does. And it's worth pointing out, by the way, that there has never been a gcmaf-related death. It just makes you better. So my life was made a lot easier when I met a new girlfriend. And a week later, I found out she was a biomedical scientist, and that, of course, was Lynn Thayer. So she read the papers, which made it a lot easier for me, because, she really is a bit of a genius in the scientific world. And I was trying to put together a sheet of paper on how to make gcmaf, and she says, well, there's no point doing this, because she had worked in NHS laboratories for 30 years. If it was any good, the NHS would have done it, and she was dead against it to start with. And eventually, in August 2010, she had a go at making it with the materials that I had bought. And by that, we had been supplying an American gcmaf before then, and I was very fortunate to be called by Professor Marco Ruggiero, MD, who is the top gcmaf scientist in the world. He was head of a team at the University of Florence. There were 10 PhDs underneath him, and they carried out over 100 gcmaf experiments, and he's probably written 50 gcmaf papers, and all their names are on them. A great team of scientists. And he said, well, what can I do for you? And I said, well, can you test it? And can you test this American stuff? And can you test the batch that Lynn's just made? And he said, well, the Americans, we got the results back a week later. The American stuff's great, and Lynn's on the right track, but she hasn't got there yet. We then seemed, it was an incredible stroke of fortune. Everything linked together. I was doing The Secret at the time. It was just a series of serendipities. It shouldn't have happened. But I did find a protein laboratory in Cambridge called Alpha Biologics. And they had two brilliant scientists there. And they had a go. Thanks. They had a go at making gcmaf, and it didn't fail. It failed. So Lynn and I went up there and said, look, it's the columns. Can you make us new columns? And by this time, I'd run out of money, so they had agreed to make gcmaf on a 30-day invoice. We would pay for it after we got it. And they agreed to make the columns, which were about £3,000 worth, on a pay afterwards invoice. Incredible luck that they would do such a thing. And the third attempt, we got an answer back from Professor Ruggiero, MD. Yep, it's really good stuff. And we so that was the 23rd of November, 2010. And we'd asked them to make 30 vials. And we shipped these 30 vials out to customers. And with the money we got from that, I was able to pay all the outstanding bills that I had got racked up creating gcmaf, including paying Alpha Biologics. So we then made 300 vials. We knew it was working. Well, I took it myself. I always took everything first myself. The first vial of everything I took myself. It cured 7 little diseases I had, really minor diseases: Dubitron contractions, arthritis across my knuckles. I had athlete's foot all my life. It went. I had hay fever all my life. It went. Can't remember all 7. Back pain, which might have been fibromyalgia, all went, and they've never come back. So we shipped our first vial across the Atlantic to a chap who had sinusitis. I said, well, it won't work for sinusitis. I want it anyway. And he'd had 15 years' worth of sinusitis. He had, he'd seen 10 doctors, got nowhere, and the gcmaf cured him in just 2 weeks, and he was over the moon. So we knew by then we'd got good stuff. I always stick with the same old stories. But Gregorio Cuesta had terminal stage 4 prostate cancer. He had a PSA of 764.5 when it should be less than 0.5. And Dr. Anderson Clinic, massive clinic in Texas, told him, you've got 4 months to live. So very sensibly, he went to our Dr. Rao, who put him on our gcmaf, and in 5 months, his PSA came down to 10.9. And the next month, Dr. Rao told him he was clear. So just to finish up the story, if you've got cancer once, you catch cancer from your surroundings. So if you get it once, you are likely to get it again, unless you move, completely change your diet, get rid of your Wi-Fi. You get it from the food you eat, everything around you. So, but it doesn't matter if you get cancer again, because you just take gcmaf again. And that worked fine until the MHRA banned all the gcmaf and killed 200 people straight off. So Gregorio Cuesta, he caught brain cancer 2 years later. Now, we treat brain cancer by putting an ultrasound probe to drive the gcmaf across the blood-brain barrier. But no, he went back to Dr. Anderson of the Anderson Clinic, of the world-famous Anderson Clinic. They've just won a Nobel Prize. We should have won it. He very sensibly, of course, put him on chemotherapy, which, as you always expect with terminal stage 4, killed him stone dead in 2 months flat. It always happens. So then I was called by a former preacher, Dr. Jeffrey Bradstreet, who wanted to use gcmaf for autism. Now, the guy was an autism expert. I mean, he just knew the subject inside out. From a scientist's point of view, although he was a doctor, he just knew everything about it. You could have conversations with Lynn about it, you know. And said, well, it's supposed to be a free world. I mean, it isn't, but if you really want some, you can have some. So then he called me back 8 weeks later and said he'd got the best results he'd ever seen. And we started out, we're not allowed to use the word cure because big pharmaceutical companies have made it persona non grata, so we have to say recovered. So we started out recovering 15% of autistic children, but at the time of Jeffrey Bradstreet's murder, we had taught him how to use ultrasound to get gcmaf across the blood-brain barrier, and both he and us were resolving non-verbal autistic kids, some of them quite violent, into verbal normal kids and sending them back to normal school in 1 week flat. And that happened with 60% of autistic children. They don't get cured now, though. I want everyone to note down this website, mhracorrupt.st. It's got the whole story about what happened to us and everyone else. It's really, really important. Please circularize that website around the world, mhracorrupt. We treated only 5 people with pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer is the one where they tell you in 8 weeks you're going to die, and in 8 weeks you're dead. We would take people with 1 or 2 weeks life left. In 3 months, they had no signs of the disease. GcMAF is the cure for pancreatic cancer. It's a slam dunk. And that's one of the worst of the cancers. GcMAF works with all with all tumor cancers, which are 90% of them. In the laboratory, it works with leukemia and multiple myeloma, but it doesn't work in tumors as well. And if we had more scientists, we would eventually find out why. When we started, we were curing 5% of terminal stage 4s. Lynn kept getting that figure up and up and up. And in the end, she was curing 89% of terminal stage 4s. As our clinic in Switzerland, she was curing 75% of terminal stage 4s. Anything less than terminal stage 4s isn't very interesting to us. We tend not to bother. We wrote a research paper. Now let's just see if I can find this. Oh gosh. Right. Well, let's just cover these points here. So, gcmaf, if it was put in the NHS, would save 120,000 lives a year. It's as simple as that. gcmaf is a safe, natural human protein and a human right. It's inside 5 billion people, and if it isn't inside a person, it's because the poison of nagalase has already been sent out by a disease or by cancer. All of this is on the gcmaf.se website. So as I wrote up this for av10, I put it on the gcmaf.eu website. And the next half of the talk is on the MHRA Corrupt website. So 11,500 patients have taken it. About 1% have had sniffles or feel a bit lousy for a couple of days. That's their immune system waking up. That's as bad as it gets. That's what you would expect with a human protein. That's why natural cures, that's why vitamins are safe, because they are natural. Drugs are created by man, and a lot of drugs kill. And, you know, the MHRA has licensed more than a dozen drugs that kill. Opioids killed 200,000. Vioxx killed 149,000. And Avandia from GlaxoSmithKline only killed 83,000. And GlaxoSmithKline is a British company, and their men sit on the board of the MHRA. That's why we got absolutely slaughtered.
If you need the website, it's there.
Oh, right.
This is your document. The lion is this document.
Okay.
The website, okay?
Thanks. So 11,500 people taken it. We got 9,000 successes. It's sort of the 80% range. We got much higher successes ourselves in the clinics than people did at home. Another story on pancreatic cancer. We had one patient who took gcmaf at home, and he could only afford 0.75 of a mil twice a week. But he reduced his pancreatic cancer over 9 months by 50%, and he was really, really coming on well. You know, I mean, we would have done that quicker in a clinic, but to do that on your own at home is very, very good. Then wiser counsels prevailed, and his parents and his doctor talked him into taking chemotherapy. And how long did it take chemotherapy to kill him? 2 months. It always takes 2 months with a terminal stage 4. And always remember that when gcmaf fails, it just does nothing. There's no nasty side effects. So 400 doctors support it. 240 obtained it directly from us, and about 100 were too frightened, so they would get their patients to buy it from us. And there's every reason to be too frightened. Dr. Jeffrey Bradstreet was murdered by an assassin who shot him in the chest. 100 American doctors have now been murdered in the same way. If you go on Erin Elizabeth's Health News website, put that into Google, she has a list with pictures of over 90 of them. And if you are an American doctor, that's how they keep you scared. It's how they stop you using gcmaf. This is how they force you to take drugs. This is how they keep you controlled. So there are 1,000 gcmaf research papers on Google Scholar. There's no excuse for the government not to know about gcmaf. There's no excuse at all, but they don't. And why? Because they take all their medical information from the MHRA. It's a disgrace. We'll go on to more of that later. So 300 scientists have written 150 peer-reviewed scientific research papers on gcmaf published in the world's top journals. This is a higher tier than Google Scholar. So in France, we're being prosecuted as a gang. So our gang consisted of 4 scientists, the most senior being Professor Marco Ruggiero, MD. What happened was he eventually wanted to leave the University of Florence and asked me if he could join us. He only wanted 20,000 a month, euros. So I thought for about 5 seconds and said, yes, absolutely. He's the best man in the world. We want him. So we had 4 scientists, 7 doctors, 2 ultrasound staff, 4 nurses, and admin staff. And we are a gang. So the American National Library of Medicine, which is the top resource in the world for scientific research papers, has 70 on gcmaf. And we're just going to look through 5 of them. This is something that we wrote to Matt Hancock, my MP, Sir Desmond Swain, wrote to Matt Hancock and said, here are 3 gcmaf research papers. Will you read them and just make sure you're not missing a trick? Don't contact the MHRA, because they won't tell you the truth. What did he do, Matt Hancock, the Department of Health? He contacted the MHRA, and we got a land of verbal abuse about the MHRA, all their standard MHRA phrases about gcmaf, and they never read the research papers. It is criminal, the incompetence of Parliament. So there's the website for the National Library of Medicine. Don't forget, all this is on the gcmaf website, so you don't have to write it down. The whole lot is. So if you go to ncbi.nih.gov/pubmed/126559668, you'll find the journal Neoplasia 2003. That is 7 senior cancer research institutes, and it lists 6 attacks that gcmaf has on cancer. That's more than any other molecule. Anyone can read this, but the government is too lazy. So then there's this article in PLOS ONE, the journal PLOS ONE, by 3 USA cancer institutes. It's got another 3 attacks gcmaf has on cancer. And we added 6 attacks that gcmaf has on other diseases, including autism and chronic fatigue syndrome and the effects of radiation, for which it is brilliant. So that's 14 things that gcmaf does. But actually, we know that gcmaf has 21 effects in the human body. So yes, it rebuilds the immune system in about 3 weeks. Yes, it activates macrophages, which eat cancer cells. Pretty much everyone knows those two. But there are 21 other things that it does. One of them is it does angiogenesis. Cancer tumors need blood vessels to get the sugar that they need to eat. Cancer only eats one thing. Everyone should know it is sugar. No oncologist will ever tell you that. They always lie. They always hide the truth. So don't eat sugar, and don't eat carbohydrates that become sugar in the body. So the angiogenesis, it grows the blood cells, arteries if you like, which take the sugar into the tumor. gcmaf stops angiogenesis point blank. We've got a research paper on it showing the reduction in the number of blood cells. So once angiogenesis has been stopped, a tumor can't grow above 1 or 2 millimeters. So suddenly, that tumor is absolutely no threat to your life whatsoever. Another thing gcmaf does is it stops secondaries. So everyone knows what secondaries are. You get a primary you get a primary cancer tumor, and then you get a secondary. And it's usually the secondaries that kill you. So gcmaf stops secondaries. So there's the next journal is the journal Pancreas. It shrinks pancreatic tumors. 2004 it was written, by cancer cell suicide and by prevention of angiogenesis, yeah? And we found out that was absolutely true. In fact, we found out that all the research papers that had ever been written were on gcmaf were absolutely true. So the Journal of Surgical Research is one of my favorites because it has a nice picture. It's by 5 of Japan's top research institutes. And that includes the Atomic Bomb Biomedical Sciences Institute of Nagasaki University. And they know more about cancer than anyone because we very kindly dropped an atomic bomb on them. Now, that's why they're called the Atomic Bomb Institute of Biomedical Sciences. And they grew human liver cancers in mice. And on page 4, there's a picture of those liver tumors shrunk 90% in just 3 weeks. So we wrote 33 scientific research papers, and they were actually written, the experiments were carried out in our laboratory and the laboratory of the University of Florence. And the clinic results were obtained in our clinics. But the papers were actually written by some of Professor Marco Ruggerio's PhDs in the University of Florence. Their medical English is streets ahead of mine, and they wrote brilliant research papers. All the research papers were by us and the University of Florence, or by a collection of doctors, etc., etc. We didn't write any on our own. You want the credibility of. So here was our first paper in anti-cancer research, which is the absolute top cancer journal in the world. And our article, a research paper there, shows gcmaf reducing tumors by 25%, and that was across 40 patients. And that's in the first week, 25% in the first week. We became the first people in the world ever to turn off the HER2 oncogene. Can I have a show of hands? How many people know what an oncogene is? Practically 10 people, perhaps. Right. It's a very, very simple lesson. Free radicals, or radiation, may create a mutated gene. One of your genes may become mutated. It may become mutated as an oncogene. Onco means cancer. This is a cancer-creating gene, and it will pour cancer into your body for the rest of your short life. And 20% of the women who have breast cancer have the HER2 oncogene. And it's never been turned off in the human body. Once you've got it for the rest of your short life. Well, Professor Agerio found us this woman, she was actually his aunt, who had the HER2 oncogene. She had breast cancer. It had gone into the pectoral muscle, was completely inoperable, and so she'd got terminal stage 4 breast cancer plus the HER2 oncogene. Her life was over. She went to our clinic at the, in Switzerland, near Lausanne, and Professor Marco Agerio treated her for 3 weeks with our favorite gcmaf, which is Goleg, which is gcmaf with olive oil added. It's actually oleic acid is olive oil, and it makes it 25% more powerful if you've got olive oil added. So he gave this for 3 weeks, and then she went back to the hospital at Careggi in Florence, Italy, who had first diagnosed her. And they said, well, this is operable now. The gcmaf has shrunk the cancer, surrounded it with pus, and taken it out of the pectoral muscle. Well, that's what gcmaf always does. It always surrounds cancer with pus. And so they just plucked it out. And then they gave her another biopsy for the HER2 oncogene, and the HER2 oncogene was turned off. And they were so surprised at the hospital, they got 4 people to sign the before and after data off into their archives. And we wrote 3 scientific research papers about that, the HER2 oncogene. Let's see if I can make this go up or down. Oh, yes, here we go. Right, so can I just ask, how many people have been to the gcmaf.se site? Very few, about 15. Everything is on there. It's really interesting. How many people have been to the MHRA Corrupt website? Okay, it's about a bit more than 15. You've all got to go to the MHRA Corrupt website and publicize it around the world. Yeah, on the gcmaf.se website, we used to have gcmaf.co.uk, they closed that down. Then we had gcmaf.eu, they closed that down. So now we're with WikiLeaks in Sweden. They won't close that down. So there are 50 patient histories. There are videos, a dozen of them. And how many people saw Ian R. Crane's video on YouTube with me and Lynn, which came out a week ago? Oh, that's much more. That's more than half of you. Well, in the middle of that, there's a video by Terry Davis Newman. So if you haven't seen it, go to YouTube, click Terry Davis Newman, T-E-R-I-D-A-V-I-S Newman, It's a 6-minute video, and she's got the whole blooming story in 6 minutes. She has HGSC peritoneal ovarian cancer, and there are no survivors in the world ever from that HGSC peritoneal ovarian cancer. Her sister died of exact same disease, and then she got it. But she died of the chemotherapy in front of her parents. And she was determined never to have chemotherapy. So she found us on the web and called us up and told us what she'd got. And I happened to be walking by the desk of the girl who received the call. And she said she couldn't afford to pay for it. And I heard the girl talking to her, and I said, "Send it to her. No charge." So we sent it out, no charge. And she was due to die on in November 2016. And today, she's a fit and healthy woman, still not recovered. And I should say that the woman with HER2 oncogene, she is completely cancer-free. So when she had the tumor plucked out and had the HER2 oncogene turned off, that made her completely cancer-free. So she went from stage 4 to completely cancer-free in 4 weeks. And she's still permanently cancer-free today. Fit as a fiddle. Right, my telephone number and email address is on the gcmaf.eu website. Okay. So now we're leaving the gcmaf.se website and going to the MHRA Corrupt website, to the last page, which says Parliament Guilty. So Parliament concealed the cancer cure. 2 million are now dead, and that is the fault of Parliament. They gave control of medicines to the pharmaceuticals. That's like giving control of the army to Adolf Hitler. British Army, Adolf Hitler. It just could not be more murderous. And Parliament has done that. So Parliament missed the discovery of gcmaf in the 1980s. And even with 1,000 scientific research papers on Google Scholar and 9,000 patients successfully treated, Parliament is still in complete ignorance. Parliament cynically delegated drafting the medicines laws to Big Pharma and then failed to monitor them. Big pharmaceuticals have a turnover of 1.3 trillion. They make money out of sickness and conceal natural remedies because there is no money in natural remedies. So not many can believe that Big Pharma delight in making money out of the ghastly poison of chemotherapy and watch people die horrible deaths as a result, just to make the £40,000 a round they charge. And it might not be just £40,000, because you may have several rounds. I met a poor woman who'd had 16 rounds of chemotherapy at our clinic in Switzerland. She was dead when she walked through the door. 16 rounds? 1 round's bad enough. Terry Davis Newman's sister spent 720,000 rounds pounds, no, dollars, $720,000 on chemotherapy, and it killed her stone dead. But what they want is the 720,000. They're not interested in life. So Big Pharma have written the medicines laws to exclude competition and to exclude new products. And that is how we got prosecuted. We got prosecuted under the medicines laws because we are a small company with a new product. And the medicines laws exist to crucify those. They have been written to protect the monopoly of the big pharmaceutical companies, and Parliament is sufficiently stupid to let it happen. Now, since 1972, 75% of our laws have been the EU's. The EU is a dictatorship. The ministers, the Prime Minister and the ministers, who are called commissioners, are not elected, they are appointed. The Parliament is powerless. And dictatorships are very dangerous things, because one day there will be a dictator who comes up through the ranks and seizes the reins of power because he can. And the EU will start wars like the world has never seen before. And we're saying, well, this is a new thing, isn't it? No, this isn't a new thing. We've been through it all before. We had a dictator in Germany. He killed, how many people did Adolf Hitler kill? No one knows. The answer is 55 million. He was the most successful practicing Satanist in history. So, the MHRA was created by Parliament to protect us from Big Pharma, their drugs, and their $1.3 trillion, which is nearly half the size of the British economy. And what did Parliament do? It left the MHRA to be funded by the big pharmaceuticals, and they quickly appointed their own board members to the MHRA, which is the worst conflict of interest in history, and that is why 200,000 people die every year because Big Pharma controls the MHRA. Only 10 minutes. All right. Okay. Well, I better skip on a bit. You can read this on the website. So we knew we would never get a license from the MHRA because the MHRA only exists to protect the profits of Big Pharma. And gcmaf will wipe out the 200 billion they make from chemotherapy. So we went without a license in order to save lives. The MHRA says we made 10 million out of gcmaf. Well, we made 7.6 million over 6 years. The CEO, after killing 83,000 people, the CEO of GlaxoSmithKline makes an annual salary of 7 million a year. So we made 7.6 million over 6 years, but out of that we had to pay for the lab, we had to pay for the clinics, we had to pay 27 staff, we had to pay a huge amount of travel to conferences and hotels because we published all the research papers that we ever wrote. And we went to 20 conferences a year. So another thing the MHRA always says about us is oh, by the way, we also paid £1.3 million to Marco Ruggiero, Professor Marco Ruggiero, MD. So there wasn't a lot left out of the 7.6 million, but the MHRA seized all our bank accounts, every single one of them, my personal ones as well as all the companies. And so we actually made not one penny. And they accuse us of being out for profit. This is after we gave away 25% of our product to patients who couldn't afford it. We're out for money. Oh yeah, thanks a bunch. GSK's out for money. You know, they get 10 billion a year. And the other thing the MHRA says, very important that we moved in to close down immunobiotech because there's a dangerous product that may cause deaths. I say again, there has never been a death from gcmaf. But there are 100,000 deaths from the MHRA's licensed drugs every single year. So they closed the company, the bank accounts, terminated the scientists and doctors, 27 staff fired. They raided us 14 times. In France, the corrupt Judge Godaud said we were in partnership with Leslie, therefore we are a conspiracy, therefore we are exposed to the European arrest warrant terrorism laws. We're classified as terrorists. So they sent 13 policemen in with 4 machine guns to arrest our only employee in France, the poor David Housel, who's 50. And I must admit, he is a bit of a terroristic chap. He has, in fact, written a book, which is pretty damn frightening, I do agree. They killed 200 of our patients who had not yet recovered because they banned all the gcmaf, and there's ghastly stories about that. We, of course, had to watch people who had become our friends die in front of us. There was nothing we could do. The MHRA don't give a damn about human life. Couldn't care less. So they used the Proceeds of Crime Act as well as the medicines laws. And there's still more court cases for us to go to about the proceeds of crime, where they're going to steal all our money. In prison, you meet innocent prisoners who the police targeted because they have money. They arrest them, the husband and wife, and then say to the man, if you plead guilty to a crime you haven't committed, we will not imprison your wife. So he does a 4 to 7 year jail term, she is let free, and then, using the proceeds of crime, they confiscate everything he has. And then, under the Proceeds of Crime Act, 2003, 50% of the proceeds are split between the court, the police, and the prosecutors. Not many people know this. I mean, lawyers and accountants are horrified by proceeds of crime because this makes the government a criminal. And the government is the biggest criminal in our society by far. So, no bank account, no piece of property, and your personal freedom. None of them are safe. If they don't like you, the police can just arrest you, put your wife in prison, threaten you. It's all over. And then they can take every penny you have. And all of this is EU law. The medicines law that we were prosecuted under, the 3,000 laws, this is proceeds of crime. It's all EU law. And in prison, you get to see a lot of people who have suffered horribly under laws from the EU dictatorship. And every single Remainer in England, every Remainer, should spend at least 6 months in Wandsworth prison to see whether or not he likes the dictatorship before he votes. So Lynn is under a European arrest warrant from Oakalesp. What they did is they invented 9 charges against me and then copied them across to her. Not only are they word for word identical, they even have my case number on her European arrest warrant. And this is after, even the MHRA have said she's entirely innocent. She was never involved in the manufacture or distribution of gcmaf. She was involved with its development, but she stopped at that point. Okay, well, this is the conclusion. So, Parliament has no idea of the cruelty and injustice they are creating. You look at Lynn out there, that's injustice, that's cruelty.
Please, could I say something? You know, this is really respectful.
Hang on one second.
Everyone has a right to a life, yeah? And when I developed gcmaf, I kind of knew it would help in the immunotherapy, and I was seeing so many people recover. And now I'm going to France for a 10-year prison sentence. You know, I'm so sorry for being disrespectful today, but it was just kind of a bit of a shock to get that email yesterday and the phone call. But you guys have a right to life, and if I can help you out, and all the therapists you must stay strong. You must stay strong, because these BASTARD
bastards.
They will take you down. Just be strong, girls, and boys. Just be effing strong, because I'm just there, one part of you, and I'm not going to let this one take me down. They are not going to take me down.
What? Now here's something that's truly amazing. If you had your time over again, would you do it?
Again? I would effing do it again. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to stop now, and I'm not going to stop in the future. They can just take me down, but they're only French.
Well, you said that I know the judge. The judge is Michael Supperstone, and
We've got a worse one than that, haven't we? We've got the French one.
Oh, the French one to come up with, yes.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the first judge, of course, well, I've got to be careful how I say this, because the first judge is the namesake of my ex-wife, Nicola's mother. Literally, first and second name. It was Barbara Crane.
You said the wrong word outside the High Court, didn't you?
Oh yeah, that was the barrister. The barrister, whose name was, well, I don't know, but we called him Seaman Staines. Oh, I called him Seaman Staines. Sorry. But Judge Supperstone, and you know, we need to get this name into the public consciousness because Supperstone is, as I said last night, he is the epitome of the corporate whore in the judiciary. He was the guy who effectively gave the green light to frack at Preston New Road last, what would that be, October, mid-October. And, you know, sitting through the court case, and I said, having heard the evidence, if this guy rules that Lynn should be extradited, then it will be a travesty because we have heard nothing that basically suggests that there's any hard evidence to warrant an extradition arrangement.
And do you think I'm going to cooperate with them? No chance.
So now, look, we have to get David and Lynn some lunch, and then David has to get back on the road. So I know there's a lot of people who want to talk to David, but please let him get into the restaurant and have his lunch because he has to be back in Plymouth by 7 o'clock, and it's potentially a 5-hour journey. And David and Lynn, the people here would very much like to give whatever support they can.
But please, can I say that these guys need all of the respect that they have because they're doing an amazing job. I'm so grateful for everyone that turns up, is a therapist, and is brave enough to put up with this SHIT. You know, I'm so sorry.
No, we completely understand, my gosh. And obviously over the next 7 or 10 days, you know, we have to get as much creativity as we can and hopefully some somewhat more sympathetic people within the legal profession to still find the avenue that we need to shut this extradition down. Because if we don't shut it down, then obviously it's an absolute given that David is going to follow Lynn into a French prison. So, you know, we still have a bit of time. It may not be much, but this is why, you know, where we need to bring as much creativity to bear as possible. And as I was saying, look, the people here want to make a contribution. They know what you're up against. And so before you leave, then we're going to give you a couple of buckets that will be sealed. They will be sealed, and we just want you to take them away and use them in whatever way you want.
Thank you.
Thank you. But also as well, I would like any therapist here just to be brave and just carry on because we can't be on our own. We need to channel this energy that we've got. I mean, I've got Vicky here with me now. We've just got to carry on to help people. That's all we've got to do. It's not difficult.
Well, you guys have set an amazing example, and you know, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to for people to live up to what you've set. But you know, at the end of the day, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people around the world who have enjoyed an extended life thanks to you guys. And as Judge Nicholas Lorraine Smith said in the court during the Newton hearing, he said he had no doubt about the efficacy of gcmaf, and he had no doubt that many people had benefited from gcmaf, and he hoped that many people would benefit in the future. And as David said, well, the guy's naive then, because that will never happen, because Big Pharma will never allow it to happen. That's what we're up against.
Can I just say that this is what British injustice and the cruelty of the British courts do to an innocent and outstanding British woman.
So if we could just please, if we can just let David and Lynn and their party go off to lunch so they can get into the lunchroom first. And